Hi, I'm Aileen. On my 33rd birthday, I sat alone at a table set for six. I wore heels I hated, poured the wine they never showed up to share, until my phone buzzed. The message from my mother read, "You're not our priority right now." They didn't forget. They made other plans without me, using the money I gave them. They ghosted my dinner to throw a party for my brother. How do you come back from something like that? Or maybe the better question is, why would you want to? I arrived 15 minutes early, just as the sun dipped behind the Denver skyline, casting long amber shadows across the sidewalk. There was a light chill in the air, just enough to make me glad I'd chosen the long-sleeved dress. It wasn't fancy, but it was intentional. The kind of outfit you wear when you want people to know you made an effort. The hostess glanced at her list and smiled. "Party of six?" I nodded, smoothing the napkin in my hand. "Yes. Aileen, I made the reservation last week." She led me to a table near the front window. 6 seats, clean, elegant place settings. A small votive candle flickering in the middle. I sat on the end, facing the entrance. The waiter stopped by. "Would you like to wait to order, or—" "They're just running a little late," I interrupted, too quickly. "I'll wait." He nodded politely and walked away. I checked my phone. 6:47 p.m. Nothing. I tried not to overthink it. Zinnia was always fashionably late. Curtis probably lost track of time again. And Mom, well, she rarely arrived early to anything unless it was someone else's event. I adjusted my fork slightly. Then again. Then again. A nervous tick. I'd picked this place for a reason. Quiet. Familiar. Not too expensive, not too casual. A place that said, "You matter enough for me to plan this." I scrolled through my phone to distract myself, pretending to be busy. An email from work. A sale at a store I didn't shop at anymore. Then the screen lit up again. This time, a text. From Mom. I unlocked it immediately. "You're not our priority right now. Enjoy your dinner." That was it. No happy birthday. No explanation. Just those 13 words, wrapped in a tone that felt rehearsed. I stared at it, reread it twice. Then again. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was deliberate. The waiter returned with a wrapped package. "Someone dropped this off earlier today for you," he said. "Said it was from your family." I thanked him, managing the kind of smile you give strangers when you don't want them to ask questions. The wrapping was neat, the kind Zinnia always insisted on. Minimalist, matte gold, no bows. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a scarf, pale blue silk. I held it up and felt a sinking recognition in my gut. I had bought this exact scarf for Mom last Christmas. I remembered the brand, the stitching, even the little snag near the edge where she caught it on her ring. I looked at the card tucked beneath the tissue paper. "Happy birthday, from all of us." But underneath that message, faintly visible, was my own handwriting, the one I'd written last year. "Love you always, Mom." They hadn't even bothered to use a new card, just rewrote over the original, like memory could be overwritten the same way. I placed the scarf back in the box. My hands were steady, but my breath wasn't. A couple at the table beside me sang softly, some kind of anniversary celebration. Glasses clinked. Laughter bubbled from the back near the bar. The world kept turning. I lifted my wineglass and took a sip. I didn't cry. I didn't call. There was no panic, no drama, just a weight settling inside me like concrete. The thing about being excluded enough times is that it eventually stops feeling shocking. I remembered birthdays where my presence felt optional, ones where Zinnia gave a speech and forgot to mention me, or where I ended up taking pictures instead of being in them. This one was different, though. This one was mine, and they chose not to show up. I sat for a while longer, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. Then I pulled a sticky note from my purse. I'd brought it to jot down a grocery list, maybe. I used it for something else. 5 words. That was all I needed. I left a 20 under my plate, more than enough for the wine, and walked out quietly. I didn't tell the waiter goodbye. I didn't check my phone. On the table, beside the untouched bread and the recycled gift box, sat the note. Thank you. No more seats. By the time I got back to my apartment, Denver had gone quiet. The sky outside my window was holding on to the last bits of blue before turning completely black. I dropped my purse on the counter, slipped off my shoes, and tossed the sticky note I'd left at the restaurant next to the fruit bowl I never filled. The apartment still smelled faintly of hairspray and anticipation. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The glow from the city was enough to navigate around my own disappointment. I poured a glass of water I wouldn't finish and sat down at the edge of the couch like I was still waiting for someone to join me. My phone buzzed. I ignored it for a moment, half hoping it was just another calendar reminder. But something in me itched. It was a notification from Instagram. Zinnia had posted a new photo. My thumb hovered over the screen. I shouldn't have clicked, but I did. The image loaded slowly. Then it hit me like a punch in the throat. There they were, Velma, Zinnia, Curtis, even Uncle Ray, who hadn't been invited to anything since he got caught lying about Dad's will. They were standing in front of the Marina restaurant in Boulder, smiling, glowing, holding glasses of champagne. Curtis stood front and center, arms stretched out like some hometown hero. In his right hand, a keyring with a motorcycle emblem. The caption? Celebrating the dreamer. He finally made it happen. My stomach turned. I zoomed in. Velma was wearing the same scarf they'd regifted me just hours earlier. On Curtis's wrist, a new watch, sleek, expensive, familiar. I blinked twice. It was the same model he'd sent me in a text 2 months ago, asking if I thought it was too much. I told him not to buy it. He'd said he couldn't afford it anyway. And yet, there it was. I set the phone down. For a second, I just stared at the reflection of my face on the black screen. Then I picked it up again and opened my banking app. There it was. Last Tuesday, $1,500 wired to Curtis's account. He'd said it was for rent. He'd cried. "They're threatening to kick me out, Aileen. I'm scared." He wasn't scared. He was shopping. I let the phone slide from my hand and fall onto the couch. My chest wasn't tight. My eyes weren't burning. I felt, still, like someone who had stepped out of their own body and was watching the scene from the ceiling. They hadn't just left me off the guest list. They'd used my money to fund the party. They'd raised a glass to my absence and paid for it with my kindness. I got up and walked over to the table. My laptop was already open from earlier that morning, when I'd tried to book a dinner reservation with enough seats for people who didn't even bother to reply. I clicked into my financial folder and created a new document. Support, unreciprocated. Line by line, I began adding what I could remember. Car loan relief, $2,800. Mortgage bridge payments, $5,200. Emergency dental for Zinnia's son, $600. Motorcycle celebration, funded unknowingly by me, $1,500. No receipts, no thank yous, no invitations. I copied the photo from Zinnia's post and pasted it beside the last line. Then I opened another tab and searched for the phrase, selective family amnesia, just to see if someone else had defined it better than I could. My phone buzzed again. A forwarded voicemail from Velma. I didn't play it. Instead, I let the notification sit on the screen while I stared out the window at the slow crawl of headlights in the distance. Somewhere, a couple was probably celebrating an anniversary. Somewhere, someone was holding a child close after a long week. Somewhere, people were choosing each other. And mine had chosen this. I whispered to the silence. This is what they chose. Let them live with it. The next morning came quietly, as if the world itself was trying not to intrude. I woke up not because of an alarm, but because the blinds hadn't been fully closed the night before. Pale light spilled across the carpet, cold and uninviting. My apartment, still tidy from hours of trying not to feel anything, looked like it had been set up for a guest who never arrived. I didn't reach for my phone. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the corner of the room where my suitcase leaned against the wall. Still packed from that weekend, I'd canceled to help Velma fix a leaking pipe. She said she'd tried calling Curtis first, but you know how boys are. I remembered missing a weekend getaway with people who actually wanted me around. And I remembered saying, "It's okay, Mom, I'll come." It was never okay. I just didn't know how to say that out loud. At the kitchen table, I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd started the night before. I created a new tab and typed the title, Emotional Overdrafts. Then I began to list. Not just the wire transfers and checks, but the moments I had withdrawn something from myself to deposit it in someone else. Canceled trip to New Mexico, Curtis's car broke down. Thanksgiving catering, no reimbursement, never acknowledged. Zinnia's baby shower decor, last-minute ask, thanked only on Facebook. Velma's emergency dental bill, claimed she'd pay me back, never did. No tears, just facts. That was the difference between sadness and clarity. Sadness left you curled up. Clarity sat you up straight and asked for itemized proof. My mind wandered. There was Zinnia's wedding. I was seated near the back, next to the catering intern and someone's ex-boyfriend. When they raised glasses for the toast, Zinnia said, "To my amazing family," then forgot my name, called me Aileen with a long I, like I was a +1. And the Christmas Eve dinner, where Velma asked me to just help in the kitchen, real quick, while everyone else posed for photos by the tree. I came out 20 minutes later with a tray of roasted vegetables and heard Uncle Ray ask, "Oh, you were here?" I was always there, just never counted as being there. The difference was subtle, but sharp. My phone finally buzzed. I glanced at the screen, a message from Marla. "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. My aunt ran into your mom yesterday. She said Velma told people you're exaggerating things, making drama, said you've always been a bit much." I set the phone down slowly. So that was the story now. Not just erased, but rewritten. My silence wasn't just being ignored. It was being used. I thought about every family gathering I'd shown up to out of guilt, every birthday party where I'd taken the photos instead of being in them, every gift I'd sent when no one remembered mine. And I thought of the photo I'd seen just hours earlier, of them celebrating Curtis, funded by my blind generosity. I scrolled through my phone and found a picture from 2 years ago. Holiday dinner. Everyone was smiling. Velma was holding a glass of wine. Zinnia wore a red satin dress. Curtis had already spilled gravy on his shirt. I wasn't in the picture, because I was the one who took it. I held the phone in my hand for a long time, staring at the image like it might finally let me in. It didn't. I was never in the picture, I whispered to the empty room, because I was the one framing it. Monday arrived wearing a gray sky and the kind of breeze that feels like something's about to shift, even if no one says it out loud. I brewed coffee more out of habit than need. The silence in my apartment was less of a comfort that morning and more like a dare. After answering a few mandatory work emails, I opened the browser and logged into the mortgage account Velma and I had shared since Dad passed. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. Just needed to double-check that the last payment I'd made actually went through. That's how it always started, with something small. But then, while skimming through the account details, I noticed an unfamiliar document attached to the property profile. It was a revised ownership agreement. My name had been listed on the original deed for 3 years. Now it was gone. I clicked the download button and opened the PDF. There it was, filed just 4 weeks ago. My name had been removed. The new document listed Velma and Curtis as co-owners. No signature line for me. No request for consent. Just a clean, silent erasure. I grabbed my phone and called the county clerk's office. After 5 minutes of hold music and 2 transfers, I was connected to a woman with a calm voice and a tired tone. "Yes, ma'am," she said, after I gave her the file number. This revision was submitted in person, Paperwork's been processed and notarized. I tried to keep my voice steady. Was there a signature from me on file? Let me check. The pause on her end stretched so long, I almost ended the call myself. Then she returned. There's a signature, yes. It says Aileen M. Jennings. Looks tidy, but no ID attached, no confirmation, just the signature page. I never signed that, I said flat. That's not mine. Well, she replied, her voice now carrying a hint of tension, I'd recommend contacting a property attorney if you believe fraud was involved. I thanked her and ended the call. Fraud. My own mother's hand likely on the pen, drawing a line through my place in the family. Again, only this time, legally. I minimized the window and tried to steady my breathing. My eyes caught the corner of a folder on my desktop. I opened it. Inside was a copy of last year's event flyer for the senior community fundraiser, the one I'd anonymously funded when the city cut their budget mid-year. Velma had shown up to the event in pearls and a pastel suit and gave a speech that left 2 board members in tears. She accepted the plaque in the family's name. The newsletter the following month called her the beating heart of the Jennings family legacy. My name wasn't printed anywhere, not even in the fine print. I dragged the revised deed into the folder and retitled it, Not Forgotten, Just Ignored. Then I took screenshots of the newsletter article and the event photo where Velma was front and center, smiling beside the mayor. I pasted them all into a single document labeled Pattern. I didn't call her. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I drafted an email to a real estate attorney I found through a referral from a coworker. It was short, direct. I attached the files, laid out the timeline, and hit send before I could overthink it. The decision felt clean. Like pulling a splinter you hadn't realized had gone septic. Scrolling back through the PDF, I stopped on the final line. All heirs in agreement. Verified. They didn't even pretend to check. They just assumed. I whispered to the quiet screen. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deleted. The light outside had begun to dim, slipping into that soft blue-gray hush that happens right before night settles in. Shadows from the trees danced across the living room floor, stretching long and uncertain. I hadn't changed out of my work clothes, hadn't really done much at all. My shoes were by the door, the microwave meal was half eaten on the table, and I sat motionless on the couch, staring at the muted TV like it owed me something. I had grown used to the quiet, but that evening, the silence felt wrong. Not peaceful, performative, like something was waiting to happen, like a drum roll before the drop. Then a knock, soft but firm. Not hesitant. No, it was the kind of knock that said, I'm coming in, whether you like it or not. I opened the door, already bracing myself, and there she was. Velma, holding a pastel gift bag, the kind you'd pick up last minute from a pharmacy. Tissue paper fluffed up like whipped topping. Her face was tight, every inch of her smile strained, like it might snap if she blinked too hard. Thought we could talk, she said, like adults. I didn't move. I didn't offer her a seat, but she walked in anyway. Of course she did. That's always been Velma, deciding what the rules were and who had to follow them. She perched on the edge of the couch as if it might stain her. I stayed standing. There was no version of this where I made myself smaller just to make her comfortable. I know how things looked, she began, smoothing her palms on her jeans. But we honestly thought maybe you needed some space. After what happened at dinner, I blinked. Just once. What happened at dinner, I said slowly, was that you didn't show up. She acted like she didn't hear me, just kept going. I just think there were misunderstandings, and, well, you're not always the easiest person to what? I asked, letting the words slice the air between us. Velma exhaled sharply through her nose, dropping the nice girl act. You're just so sensitive. You always take everything personally, like the world is out to get you. Ah, there it was. The old refrain, the family classic, that I was the problem, that I was too much, or not enough, that I couldn't take a joke, couldn't let things go, Couldn't just be easy like everyone else. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Not the way they wanted me to be. I looked her in the eye and said, calm and clear, "No, I just stopped lying for you." Her mouth twitched. Not a smile, not quite a frown. Just that uncomfortable recognition that someone has seen through you. She crossed her arms and leaned back, like she was settling into her disappointment. "I didn't come here to apologize," she said. "I just didn't want people thinking we abandoned you." Of course not. It wasn't guilt. It was optics. She placed the gift bag on the table, like some kind of offering, her expression stiff with effort. I picked it up, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it gently into the trash can. Not with anger, with finality. When I turned back around, she was still watching. Frozen. I reached into a drawer near the sink and pulled out the folder I had prepared earlier that week. I'd been waiting, not hoping, preparing. I handed her a single page from it. It was neat, detailed. A financial breakdown, every contribution I'd made to the family over the last 5 years. Dates, amounts, rent, groceries, utility bills, emergency bailouts no one ever paid back. Velma glanced at it, then looked at me. Her face didn't move, but her fingers tightened around the paper. "This," I said, "is who you've been talking about behind my back." She opened her mouth to respond, but didn't find the words. I didn't stop. "Next time someone asks where I've been, tell them the truth. Tell them I stopped paying to be ignored." Her shoulders dropped slightly, like the mask was too heavy to hold up anymore. She stood slowly, adjusted her coat like it was armor, and walked to the door. Just before she left, she paused, one hand on the knob, and muttered over her shoulder, "You'll regret this once you're alone." I walked her to the door, closed it quietly behind her, and turned the lock. Then, I leaned my forehead against the wood, breathing in the weight of it all. Not sadness, not victory, just release. "I've already been alone," I whispered. "This time, it's by choice." And in the stillness that followed, I didn't feel hollow. I felt free. Friday evening slid in without ceremony, the kind of quiet that makes you realize just how loud your life has been. Outside, the air had turned crisp, dry, with that first whisper of winter tucked beneath it. I hadn't bothered to shut the balcony door after the sun dipped below the skyline. Letting the cold creep in felt like my own silent rebellion. It stung a little, sure, but it was honest, cleaner than the backhanded concern and performance apologies I'd been fielding for weeks. I sat cross-legged on the edge of the couch, barefoot, a throw blanket wrapped around my shoulders like a shield. A glass of wine sat untouched on the side table beside me, the rim catching a sliver of lamplight. I wasn't drinking tonight, not out of discipline, but because I wanted to feel everything, clear and raw. My mind wandered back to Velma's visit, but this time I didn't flinch. I didn't replay her tone or the expression she wore like she was auditioning for Martyr of the Year. Instead, I just heard the words. Not as threats, not as daggers, just as static that had finally stopped buzzing. "You'll regret this once you're alone." I let those words settle in the room like dust. Then I looked around. Alone wasn't new. Alone wasn't a punishment. It was where I had always done my clearest thinking, where I'd stitched myself back together after the last time they tore through me with their expectations, their entitlement, their relentless hunger to take without asking. I stood slowly, walked to the balcony door, and shut it. The latch clicked into place with a sound that felt final, like a door that doesn't need to open again. I turned to go back to the couch, and that's when my phone lit up. The family group chat. Alive and well, apparently. It had been weeks since I opened it. Still, the notifications crawled across my lock screen like a bad dream coming back for another round. Emergency call tonight, 8 p.m. sharp, no drama this time. Let's try to keep it civil and productive. And then, from Zinnia, don't invite her this year, she ruins the mood. The chat had a new name now, Family First, followed by a broken heart emoji and a waving hand. They didn't remove me. That would have taken a spine. Instead, they just kept talking as if I'd already left the room, as if I never belonged in it. I stared at the thread for a moment. My thumb hovered. Then I hit mute. Then delete. Not rage, not spite, just peace. I opened my inbox, hoping for something to pull my focus somewhere else, somewhere less toxic. And there it was. A new email from the real estate attorney I'd contacted earlier in the week. Subject: Final title adjustment confirmed. I clicked it open, my pulse slow and even. The message was short. Efficient. All title removals have been processed. Your name no longer appears on the joint property, effective immediately. No ceremony, no apology, just cold, clean truth. I exhaled, long and steady. My body didn't jump with joy. My heart didn't race. This wasn't triumph. This was extraction. A surgical removal from a sickness I'd spent too long calling family. I got to work, quietly tying off the remaining threads. I unsubscribed from the grocery delivery service Velma had hooked up to my account, still sending crates of expensive snacks to her house, like it was some family tax I owed. I shut down the autopay for the shared streaming accounts, the photo cloud, the password logins. One by one, I cut myself loose from every shared shadow they'd left behind. Then I drafted a message. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a release. Handled what I needed. No further responses required. I sent it into the void of the muted thread. Then, I opened a new folder on my desktop. Named it, Closure is Mine Now. Inside, I dragged the scanned title deed, the receipts, the screenshots, the thread where Zinnia suggested I skip Christmas for everyone's sake, the email where Velma denied borrowing my emergency fund, then Venmo'd it to herself the same day. I didn't plan to reopen that folder, but I needed it to exist. Proof. Not for them. For me. Because when someone tries to rewrite your story, you better be ready to show them the original. I passed the hallway mirror on my way to the bedroom. Something stopped me. I hadn't looked at myself, really looked, for days. I stepped back and stared. My reflection stared back. Same eyes, same face, but different posture. I didn't look like someone trying to win anyone back. I didn't look like someone begging to stay. I looked like someone who had finally stood still, long enough to let the storm pass, and realized she was still standing. You broke me once, I whispered to the mirror. My voice didn't shake. This time, I'm the one walking away. I turned off the lights. The room went dark, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid of it. I felt free. Saturday morning arrived with a kind of hush, like the world had tiptoed in, not wanting to disturb me. The sunlight crept slowly across the living room floor, filtering in through the blinds, as if testing whether it still belonged here. For the first time in weeks, I didn't reach for my phone first thing. I made coffee, 2 scoops of the bold roast I'd hidden from guests. I watered the plants by the window, talking to them like they were old friends. I even pulled out that book I'd promised myself I'd finish, a collection of essays on stillness I'd barely cracked. For a moment, just a moment, I believed I might be able to slip into the rhythm of a life that belonged solely to me. One that didn't orbit around obligation, guilt, or manufactured loyalty. A quiet, self-authored kind of life. Then my phone lit up. 1 missed call, then 3, then 7. The family group chat, as always, had undergone another rebrand. It used to be called Emergency Mortgage Crisis. Then it became Unity Over Blood, and now it read Family Unity SOS. I didn't even need to open the thread to know what it meant. They were spiraling. A string of messages followed. Let's talk tonight. No judgment, just solutions. Time to come together. We can fix this. We need to regroup. And finally, the one that froze my fingers mid-scroll. Zinnia. Let's be real. Don't invite her this year. She ruins the mood. I stared at the screen. Her profile photo hadn't changed. It was still that overly filtered Thanksgiving group shot, taken at the house I'd partially paid for. The one where I was cropped out, just beyond the edge of the fireplace. Smiling, arms full of pies. Forgotten. I didn't respond. I didn't even finish reading the thread. I took a breath, captured screenshots of every message, and moved them into a folder I'd created at my attorney's suggestion. Defamation log. Inzio 1. It was growing faster than I expected. Instead of spiraling, I reached for something else. A weathered book from the bottom shelf, one my dad had given me years ago. It wasn't about money or law or ambition. It was about stillness. Something I hadn't known I was craving until recently. Halfway through the book, a page bent with use stuck out. A folded slip of paper had been tucked inside, thin, creased, with my dad's unmistakable handwriting. It read, "You are the one who gives without asking. Don't let them take that from you. Giving isn't weakness, baby girl. It's strength. But strength must be honored, or it turns into burden. And burden breaks." I sat there holding the letter, letting its truth crack through something tight inside me. It wasn't sadness that made my eyes sting. It was recognition, the ache of finally being seen, even in silence. I stood up and walked toward the photo wall. So many moments, frozen in time. But not mine. Zinnia's engagement party, where I had paid for catering and cleaned up solo at midnight. Gone. Curtis holding his newborn. I paid the hospital deposit when insurance didn't cover the rest. Gone. The family trip to Sedona, the one Velma took credit for? I had the receipts. Gone. I took down each photo, one by one. They clinked against each other as I dropped them into a trash bag. All except one. The picture of Dad and me, just us, laughing on the front porch, summer light in our hair. I tucked it behind my bedroom closet door, taping it inside so it wouldn't fall. That was the only memory I wanted to keep. Back in the living room, I checked my phone again. Zinnia had posted something new on her feed. A photo of a dimly lit family dinner, cropped tightly around the table. Caption: "Even when someone disappears, family still stands together." The comments rolled in like clockwork. "Hope you're okay. You've always been the strong one. She's probably going through something. Just pray for her." I didn't cry. I took screenshots. I attached them to an email titled Defamation Log, SU1, and sent it to my attorney with a single line, "For the case file." Then I powered off the phone and set it face down on the table. The silence didn't scare me, not anymore. "They wanted a quiet collapse," I said aloud, voice steady, steady in a way I hadn't felt in years. "What they're getting is controlled detonation." And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not just free from them, but free to define what came next. No more adjusting the tablecloth. No more cropping myself out. No more pretending that being silent meant being kind. I wasn't disappearing. I was reclaiming. One photo, one folder, one truth at a time. I pulled out of the parking lot just before sunset. The little store-bought chocolate cake, still in its plastic container, sat on the passenger seat beside a worn paperback copy of All the Pretty Horses. It was Dad's favorite. I'd found it last night in a box marked Winter Coats, and for some reason, it felt right to bring it with me. The drive from Denver to Boulder wasn't long, just under an hour, but long enough to make me feel like I was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The air carried that dry chill that comes when summer starts losing its grip. Golden light filtered through the cottonwoods, and I noticed the way their branches moved, like they were exhaling, like they too had been holding their breath. I passed the restaurant where I'd waited alone the week before. That awful Tuesday. I didn't flinch. I didn't even glance at the valet stand. It didn't mean anything anymore. Some places lose their meaning when the people in them stop meaning anything. Edith's care home was quiet. Peaceful even. The woman at the front desk gave me a brief nod as she buzzed me in. She didn't ask who I was, or why I carried a lopsided chocolate cake with a single candle taped to the lid. Maybe she knew, or maybe she'd stopped trying to make sense of the stories that walked through those doors. Some visits don't need explanations. They're written on your face, in your hands, in the quiet way you move. I found Edith sitting near the wide front window in the common room. The light made everything glow a little. She was flipping through one of those oversized magazines meant for aging eyes. More pictures than text, the kind that fills space, but not necessarily minds. She looked up slowly, squinting at first, then grinning in that soft, crinkled way of hers. "Well," she said, folding the magazine in her lap, "would you look at that?" "Happy belated birthday to me," I said, holding up the cake like it was a trophy. She chuckled. "You're the only person I know who brings her own cake to her own party." "With one candle," I added, "and no guest list." "I'd say one guest is enough," she said. I set the cake on the little coffee table between us. I used the tiny lighter I kept in my purse, mostly for emergency incense or frayed shoelaces. Apparently now, for birthday symbolism too. I lit the candle. The flame flickered weakly in the late sun. We didn't sing, didn't make a wish out loud. We just sat and shared a crooked slice of too sweet cake and sipped coffee that had been sitting on the warmer too long. It was bland, but I didn't mind. I don't think she did either. In that moment, I felt more seen than I had in years. "I never had a daughter," Edith said after a while, leaning back. "But if I had, I think I would have wanted one like you. Stubborn, not soft. The kind of girl who doesn't wait for someone to offer her a chair, just drags one over and sits down." I stared at her, holding her words like a photograph I wanted to press into a book and keep forever. "If I'd had a mother like you," I said quietly, "maybe I wouldn't have spent so many years learning how to exist in rooms where no one saved me a seat." We didn't cry. Neither of us even blinked hard. Some griefs don't spill out. They just settle. By the time I left, the sky had turned that pale lavender shade you only get in Colorado, between late summer and early fall. The road back home felt different. Lighter. My phone buzzed twice in the cup holder. I didn't check it until I parked outside my building. The screen lit up. Voicemail from Velma. I pressed play. Her voice came through, hoarse and shaking. "You've made your point," she said. "This family is breaking because of you." I didn't finish listening. I deleted the message mid-sentence, before she could list all the other things I'd apparently destroyed. The guilt wasn't mine anymore, and I wasn't going to borrow it back. In the mailbox downstairs, a plain envelope waited. Legal stationery. I knew what it was before I tore it open. It was done. Signed and notarized. Final and binding. My name no longer appeared on any shared property titles. No more joint accounts. No more inherited obligations. Every last thread had been cut. Clean, official, irreversible. Inside my apartment, I turned on the lamp by the bookshelf and lit the same candle I'd used with Edith. I didn't know why. Maybe I just needed to mark the moment with light. Then I sat down and pulled out a blank note card. "Happy birthday, Aileen. You were worth showing up for." I placed it next to the only framed photo I still kept. Me and Dad, standing ankle-deep in a lake upstate, holding fishing rods and grinning at something I can't remember anymore. But we looked happy. I was barefoot. He was wearing that old ball cap he never let anyone touch. Then I opened my laptop. New folder, new file. Title: What I Owe Myself. Chapter 1. I didn't write a manifesto. I didn't draft a speech. I just typed, slowly, carefully, not to prove anything to anyone, but because I finally could. Because my story didn't belong to them anymore. And as the words filled the page, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Sunday arrived before the sun even broke the horizon. I didn't need an alarm to wake me. My eyes opened to silence. No buzz of my phone, no urgent texts, no one tugging on the edge of my peace. The stillness wasn't just quiet. It was earned. And this time, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like space. Mine. I stepped barefoot across the cool hardwood floor, heading toward the kitchen. My steps felt different, less rushed, more grounded. I brewed a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, listening to the faint hum of the machine and the occasional birdsong outside. Still no alerts, No calendar reminders. Just me, my breath, and the soft beginning of a day I didn't have to survive. I could simply live. Coffee in hand, I walked to the patio and did something I hadn't done in months. I slid the door open. Fully. The morning air rolled in gently. Not sharp, not intrusive, just honest. Like it wasn't asking anything of me. And I didn't flinch. I took a long sip of coffee, then just stood there, watching the sky shift colors. I wasn't waiting for anything or anyone. For once, I didn't feel like I was preparing for battle. I wasn't rehearsing a defense or crafting a careful reply. I wasn't trying to earn space that was already mine. My phone buzzed from the other room. I didn't rush. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and dried my hands before checking it. Voicemail, from Curtis. I hesitated for a beat, then played it. No greeting, no emotion. Just his voice, sharp and familiar. Mom's freaking out. The mortgage is overdue again. The bank's calling. You knew this would happen when you pulled out. Just like that. No responsibility. No reflection. Just blame. Tossed like a hot potato in my direction. I didn't feel heat rise in my chest. I didn't feel the sting I used to. I just forwarded the message to my attorney with a simple subject line. Do not engage. A few minutes later, another ping. The family group chat I hadn't touched in over a week lit up. Velma. We didn't raise you to be cold. Zinnia, like clockwork, chimed in. You're still family, but family doesn't abandon. I just stared at the screen for a moment. They didn't raise me to be cold. They raised me to be silent, to absorb, to bend, to keep showing up even when the door was closed in my face. This wasn't abandonment. This was preservation. For the first time in my life, I wasn't cutting ties out of anger. I was choosing peace over performance. I placed the phone face down and walked to the bedroom. My closet door was already half open, and I pulled it the rest of the way. Inside, still taped to the wood, was a photo of Dad and me, slightly wrinkled from time, corners curled just a little. He was laughing in it, his hand on my shoulder, steady and proud. For a long time, I thought that photo was proof that I'd been loved. Once. But now? It reminded me of who I was when no one was watching. I grabbed a sticky note and wrote, You didn't raise me to break. You taught me how to hold. I pressed it beside the photo and smoothed the edges flat. Then I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the document I'd started after my talk with Edith. The title still read, What I Owe Myself, Chapter 1. I stared at the blinking cursor for a while, letting the quiet speak first. Then I began to type. Lesson 1. You are allowed to leave the table when love is no longer being served. I reread it. Then I smiled, hit save, and leaned back. I opened a new browser tab and searched for flights, not because I wanted to disappear, but because I wanted to arrive. Somewhere fresh. Somewhere I didn't carry old definitions of who I had to be. There would be no dramatic exit, no social media goodbye, no announcement, no final plea for understanding. Just a quiet decision, a booked seat, a tomorrow that belonged only to me. And that, right there, that was the freedom I'd been chasing all along. Not a house, not approval, not the illusion of reconciliation. But this. The soft click of a door opening in the morning, the taste of coffee without anxiety, the ability to read a cruel message and choose not to answer, the courage to say, this isn't where I stay anymore. I didn't feel lonely, I felt whole, and I knew, wherever I was going next, I wouldn't be bringing their silence with me, only my voice, and that was enough. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant to hold me, and when I finally stood up, I realized I had the strength to build my own. If you're listening and you've ever felt like the background character in your own life, I want you to know this. Your worth isn't defined by who claps for you, but by how you choose to clap for yourself. Now I'm curious, have you ever had to let go of people you once called family just to finally find peace? Share your story in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And if this video resonated with you, drop a 1 in the chat. Or tell me why it didn't. I welcome every voice here. If you believe in healing, strength, and stories that speak to the heart, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There's more truth where this came from. Hello, I'm Elodie. People say family should be your safe place, your truth. But what if your truth is the one they keep rewriting? My sister slapped me in the middle of a jewelry store, in public, in front of strangers. And the only person who stood up for me wasn't even family. Worse than her hand across my face was the lifetime of quiet cuts before it, being erased from family photos, blamed for debts I didn't owe, and told by my own mother, "You were never meant to lead." So when a billionaire called me his wife and told her, "Touch her again and see what happens," was that justice, or just the first time someone saw me? Would you have stayed silent as long as I did? I showed up right on time, not early, not late, just enough to avoid being that daughter who was trying too hard to be noticed. The sun was dipping behind the Santa Barbara Hills as I parked 2 blocks down from the house I grew up in, now bustling with rented lights and blooming floral arrangements. Isolda's wedding rehearsal dinner was tonight, and apparently I had a role to play. Unpaid, uninvited, but expected. The driveway was full, which wasn't surprising. The Varelli name still held social weight in Mission Canyon, even if that weight had never landed on my shoulders. I stepped around the back entrance, as instructed. My mother didn't want me making an entrance that might confuse the vendors. She said it kindly, of course, smiling with that brittle warmth that had raised me. Inside, chaos. Controlled, polished chaos. Isolda, dressed in cream silk and commanding a clipboard, was directing the lighting techs with the confidence of someone who had never heard no, unless she was the one saying it. "Elle," she called over without looking, "can you make sure the gift table has the right tags? And maybe straighten the place cards at table 5? They're uneven." My mother, hearing this, approached with a kiss to my cheek and a coffee cup, not for me, but for a florist. "Elodie's always had an eye for detail," she said, smiling at the florist instead of me. "She's our secret weapon, aren't you, honey?" I nodded. No one noticed. There was no place card with my name on it, not at table 5, not at any table. So I ate near the kitchen, balancing a plate on my lap while the servers restocked the charcuterie. And I told myself it was fine. I wasn't hungry anyway. That wasn't the first time I'd been placed behind the scenes. I remember being 12, lighting every candle for my mom's birthday, while Isolda stood at the front of the room accepting hugs and compliments for the party. I had handwritten the menu, marinated the chicken, and folded the napkins into roses. My father raised his glass and said, "To Isolda, our family's real hostess," and I smiled like I was supposed to. I never corrected anyone. I thought that was grace. I thought it made me strong. Back in the present, I watched from the edge of the rehearsal dinner as relatives posed for pictures. Isolda looked radiant in every frame, her cheek kissed by her fiancé, her arm around our mother, their laughter synchronized. One of the family friends waved me over for a photo, but just as I stepped forward, Isolda placed a hand lightly on my arm. "You look tired, Elle. Why don't you sit this one out? The lighting's kind of harsh over here." I nodded. No one noticed. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. I did laundry. I rearranged the spices in my cabinet alphabetically. I checked my email twice, and I scrolled. There it was, on Instagram, posted by my mom. A surprise pre-wedding brunch, matching shirts, a cake with gold lettering, and a slideshow playing behind them filled with baby photos. My baby photos. My sister's voice over the video. Family is everything. I wasn't invited. There was no call, no text, just a caption. Surround yourself with those who matter most. I put the phone down. My apartment felt like it had swallowed sound itself. No one had remembered. Or worse, they had remembered and decided I didn't belong. I didn't beg. I didn't dial their numbers just to ask why. Instead, I stood in my kitchen and whispered barely above breath, "If I don't matter to them, I'll start building a life where I do." The message was short. I typed it, stared at it for 10 seconds, then hit send. "Can we talk this weekend?" I didn't wait for a response. I went back to counting inventory at the boutique. Tuesday afternoons were usually quiet, just me and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. But that day, the silence didn't soothe me. It pressed against my chest like humidity in the middle of fall. A little after 4, the front bell rang. I looked up, expecting one of our regulars or maybe a UPS drop-off. Instead, a woman I didn't recognize stepped inside. Tan linen blazer, oversized sunglasses, clutch in hand like she was about to walk into a boardroom, not a boutique. "Hi," I greeted her, trying to keep my tone neutral. She didn't smile. "Are you Elodie?" "Yes." "You vouched for Isolde Varelli, didn't you?" Her voice was flat, clipped. "Told me she was starting a family investment circle?" It took me a second to realize what she was saying. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean." Her eyes narrowed. "She said you were her reference, that you told people she was trustworthy. I gave her $25,000, Elodie. That's not pocket change." I stared at her, throat tightening. "I didn't. I never said anything to anyone about any investments. I wasn't even aware of this." She exhaled, irritated. "Then why would she name you? Why would she say you were involved?" I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. Because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Because my name had been a convenient prop in Isolde's life for longer than I wanted to admit. "I'm sorry," I said, calmer than I felt. "I'll speak to her. But please know I didn't authorize any of this." She gave me a look like she'd heard that line too many times before and left without another word. The store was empty again, but the air had changed. I closed early, couldn't pretend I was in the right frame of mind to smile and offer scarves and scented candles. On the drive home, I didn't blast music like usual. I needed clarity, not noise. At my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, and dialed. Isolde picked up on the third ring. "Hey, Elle, what's up?" "Someone came into my store today," I began. "Said you used my name to get money for some investment thing." She was silent for just a moment too long. "Oh, that." "That?" I repeated. "Come on," she said, a light laugh behind her words. "I figured it was fine. You're the grounded one. People trust you. I didn't think it'd be a big deal. You used my name without telling me." "Elle, don't be so dramatic. It was just a small thing. You know how these circles work. Everyone vouches for everyone. You're good with people. You calm them down." She said it like it was a compliment, like she'd gifted me a role to play. "I'm not your human buffer, Isolde." There was another pause. "Oh my God, Elodie, are you seriously upset? Mom said you always take things too far. It's not like I scammed anyone. I'll give it back." "That's not the point," I said, already knowing it was useless. That night, I didn't sleep right away. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it made slow, rhythmic turns above me. My mind wandered back to 3 years ago. Isolde was interviewing for a director role at a nonprofit that supported single mothers re-entering the workforce. She'd asked me to help her with her presentation. We'd spent a weekend together, me drafting slides, editing language, coaching her tone. She got the position. At the award dinner, she gave a speech about women lifting each other up. She never said my name. When she introduced me to the board afterward, she laughed and said, "This is my sister. She's the quiet one." The quiet one. I got in my car the next morning and drove toward Carpinteria, not for any reason except that I needed to see the ocean. I parked near the cliffs and walked to where the sand met stone, the sky overcast, water slow and steady like breath. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet because I thought it was the right thing to do. That silence kept peace. That self-erasure was a form of strength. I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe silence just gave people more room to step over me. By the time I returned home, something inside had shifted. Not an explosion, but a reset. I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, looked at years of holiday gifts, passive-aggressive potluck reminders, and photos where I was always off to the side. Then I deleted it. I went to my contacts, scrolled to a name I'd saved after a legal workshop I helped host last spring. Augustin, legal. I typed one sentence. Can we talk this weekend? And this time, I waited for the reply. Then I clicked accept. I stared at the calendar notification a moment longer before locking my phone and setting it face down on the arm of the couch. The living room had gone quiet except for the low whir of the old ceiling fan overhead. Outside, a soft breeze rustled the orange tree just beyond my kitchen window. I didn't move. Not right away. I stood up eventually, more out of instinct than decision, and walked toward the linen closet. Inside, pushed behind a stack of mismatched towels and a faded Christmas table runner, was an old wooden box with brass hinges, the kind my grandfather used to keep his tools in. I pulled it down, brushing away a layer of dust as I sat cross-legged on the floor. Inside, pieces of me I hadn't looked at in over a decade. Tucked beneath dried lavender and curled edges of photographs was a folded sheet of notebook paper, the kind with the perforated edge still clinging on. My handwriting, too neat, too desperate, read, "I wish you'd tell them I helped too." I remembered writing it, 16, raw with some ache I couldn't name. I had planned to tuck it into Isolde's book bag before a school trip. I never did. I kept telling myself I'd outgrow the need to be seen. I unfolded it again, read every word like I was seeing it for the first time. Then I reached for a matchbook in the drawer under the TV. The first flame flickered just past my fingertips before I closed the matchbook again. I didn't burn it. I folded the letter even smaller, tighter, and slipped it into the front pocket of my jeans like it needed to come with me for whatever came next. I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes. 13 years old. That's when it started for real. Mom and Dad were hosting their 20th wedding anniversary at home. It was going to be small, just close friends, some coworkers. Isolde had volleyball practice and couldn't help, so I stepped in. I planned it, every detail, the timeline, the playlist, even the table placements. I color-coded the menu based on who had dietary restrictions. I stayed up until midnight handwriting the guest cards because our printer jammed. The next morning, I found my binder, ribbons added, my handwriting traced over in silver pen. Isolde's name on the front cover. I froze. I didn't ask. I didn't say a word. She handed the binder to Mom at brunch, who beamed and said, "That's my girl, always the leader." I remember holding my original binder beside the trash can in the garage. I stood there for a long time before finally dropping it in. I told myself back then, she needed the win more than I did. And that became my excuse for everything. She needed the attention. She needed to feel capable. I told myself that letting her have it wasn't weakness. It was kindness. It was maturity. It was love. But the truth? It was silence. A silence I had agreed to because it kept the house from cracking. I opened my eyes. Back in my apartment, the light was dimmer now. Shadows crept along the tile floor. I stood and crossed to the mirror above the sink. I stared at my reflection, not for beauty or age or lines I hadn't noticed, but to meet something in my own eyes. "It wasn't okay," I said softly. It didn't echo back in the physical sense, but something in the room shifted. Something in me, too. For years, I'd believed that being the calm one gave me power, that by being dependable, by stepping aside, I had control over how I was remembered. But what if all it did was teach them how to forget me more efficiently? A ping from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. I returned to the couch and tapped the screen. Calendar invite. No subject line, just a title. Confidential meeting, prenuptial review, sent by Augustine Cade. My thumb hovered over the screen for a beat before I accepted. And then, instead of putting the phone down, I picked up the little wooden box again and placed it on the shelf, open for the first time. The morning air was cool when I stepped out of my car in the underground garage below Augustine's building. Saturday, just after 10. I hadn't slept much the night before, but not from anxiety. More like my mind had finally gotten too loud to pretend it wasn't saying things I didn't want to hear. The elevator ride was quiet, no music, no small talk, just the soft hum and numbers changing. When the doors opened, a receptionist greeted me by name and gestured down the hallway. His office wasn't what I expected, not cold, not overly grand. Sleek, yes, but lived in. A bookshelf with titles that weren't just decoration, a ceramic bowl with car keys and a scratched wedding ring he probably didn't wear anymore. He looked up from behind a long table, standing as I entered. "Elodie," he said simply, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thanks for coming." I sat, smoothing my hands over my skirt, which had wrinkled during the drive. "Let's not pretend this isn't unusual." He chuckled, nodding. "Fair enough, but it's honest." He slid a folder toward me. "In short," he began, "this would be a 1-year legal marriage. No expectations beyond what we mutually agree to. Public appearances, occasional joint events. You'd be compensated, substantially." I flipped through the pages. It felt like reading about someone else's life, someone whose world operated on clauses and fine print. I didn't speak for a while. When I did, I asked, "Why me?" His gaze didn't waver. "Because you don't crave attention, and because I've watched you be erased in rooms you should have commanded. I respect quiet people who know they don't deserve to be forgotten." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me swipe to listen. The voicemail began mid-laugh, my mother's voice, unfiltered, talking to someone, probably one of her sisters. "Elodie." That girl always needed someone to remind her she's not the main character. Sweet, sure, but she's not made to lead. She's background. That's just how it is. The message ended. I didn't feel punched. I felt solid, like a wall had finally dropped, and I could see the structure behind it. I replayed it once, just once. Then I deleted it. Augustine hadn't spoken during my reaction. He waited. I looked at the contract again, not because I needed convincing, but because I needed a second to swallow what I'd just heard. My mother, someone I'd always defended, excused, rationalized, had said exactly what I had been afraid to admit. She didn't see me, not as an equal, not as her daughter in full, just a support beam. I folded the paper, not signing yet. "I used to think she meant well," I murmured, not even realizing I was speaking aloud. That maybe I was just hard to love in the way she understood. But now, I don't think she ever looked for me in the room. He didn't nod, didn't offer comfort. That I appreciated. He waited for me to finish my own thought. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Augustine's brow lifted, more in respect than surprise. But one thing, I added, if you lie to me, in any form, I walk. I don't care how many zeros are on the check. He nodded, slowly. That's fair. I've lived too long on other people's terms. I'm not negotiating who I am anymore. We both stood. No handshake, no smile, just a shared understanding. The drive home was quiet again, but this time I didn't feel invisible. I felt sharp, present. There was a clarity I hadn't carried in years. I parked in front of my apartment, grabbed my phone, and called the boutique. 1 ring, 2. Hi, Janine, I said when my assistant picked up. I need to step away from the store for a bit. Personal reasons. A pause. Sure thing, Elodie. You okay? I will be. I ended the call, opened the calendar app, and added a new contact to a new profile, Mrs. Cade. I hung up with Janine, then took a breath that felt bigger than the room around me. The call had been brief, but every word of it carried weight. I wasn't asking for permission, I was informing, and that shift, however small, mattered. By Thursday afternoon, the sun was out in full force, throwing gold across the streets of downtown Santa Barbara. I parked 3 blocks away from Corvana Co., not because I had to, but because I needed the walk. Each step helped settle my mind, center my thoughts. When I walked into the boutique, the atmosphere changed. Elodie, welcome back, the assistant manager beamed as she approached with a light touch on my elbow. We just got the new arrivals. Would you like sparkling water while you browse? I smiled, a little surprised. Not long ago, this staff barely made eye contact. But now I had a last name that carried weight in the building. I'm just looking, I said. But thank you. I wandered over to a display near the back, letting my fingers hover above a modest gold necklace. Simple, clean, not too loud. Something I would have picked for myself before the contract, before the voicemail, before Mrs. Cade. I was holding it up against my collarbone when I heard the laugh. It hit me before I even turned around. Sharp, performative, unmistakable. Isolde. And our mother. Their voices moved closer before I even had time to set the necklace down. When I finally turned, they were already 10 feet away, gliding in like they owned the place. Isolde's eyes met mine and froze for a beat. Elodie? She said, as if my name tasted strange in her mouth. You shop here now? I didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly. Or are you just returning someone else's generosity? The way she said it, just loud enough for 2 nearby staffers to hear, just soft enough to feign innocence, made my stomach clench. Our mother looked at me, then quickly away. Elodie, don't make this awkward. Your sister has an appointment. I nodded once. I'm not the one making it awkward. Isolde stepped closer, her smile tight. Honestly, Elle, it's getting weird. You showing up in places like this, dressing like you suddenly found yourself in a magazine spread. I didn't flinch. She continued. You're not fooling anyone. You've always needed someone to carry you. Now you found someone rich enough to make it look legit. I let her words settle, let the silence stretch so long she started to fidget. Then I said, clear and steady, if I make you uncomfortable just by existing, maybe it's time you sat with why. Isolde blinked. I'm not your echo anymore, so stop calling me noise. That's when the air shifted. People stopped pretending not to listen. Our mother opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure of where to land. For once, I didn't try to help her. Isolde's face flushed. She took a step forward, just a little too fast. Oh, you want to act like a big shot now? She said. Fine, act like one. She stood inches from me, her voice low now, eyes narrowed. But don't think I won't call it what it is. You're using someone, just like you always accused me of doing. Her hand twitched. A reflex, maybe, maybe not. I didn't move. Her eyes dared me to flinch, to retreat like I always had. But I stayed still. The clerk behind the counter took an awkward step toward us, likely unsure if this was personal or security-worthy. Everything around us felt frozen. One wrong word could start a storm. She didn't touch me first. She spoke first. "This is why you'll always be backup cast." And then the slap landed, hard, fast, and louder than anyone expected, even her. The sound cracked across the boutique like glass under pressure. I didn't move. Not when her hand hit my face, not when the tray beside me clattered to the ground, not even when my necklace slipped from my fingers and bounced twice before settling at the base of a velvet pedestal. The room stopped. No one breathed. The sales associate froze mid-step. A couple near the register turned toward us. Someone's phone made the distinct click of a camera shutter. My cheek burned, but my hands didn't go up. My mouth didn't open. I just bent slowly, deliberately, and picked up the necklace. My fingers trembled, but I stood tall. I didn't say a word, not yet. Then, just as the silence was beginning to crack under its own weight, another voice cut through it, clear, cold, and undeniable. "Touch my wife again, and see what happens." Heads turned. Phones lifted. Gasps echoed against marble and crystal. Augustine. He stood just inside the doorway, still in his navy overcoat, one hand in his pocket. His presence wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. He didn't step forward like a man defending someone he pitied. He moved like someone protecting what he respected. The moment he crossed the showroom, the entire room shifted around him. Isolde blinked, stunned. "Wife?" He ignored her. Instead, he came directly to me and placed a steady hand at the center of my back. Not possessive, anchoring. To Isolde, he said, voice flat as slate, "I saw everything, and you're lucky she didn't hit back. Because I might." Our mother sputtered. "Excuse me, but this is a family misunderstanding. There's no need to escalate." He didn't even glance at her. He raised a hand slightly, and from the far end of the store, two security personnel in dark suits stepped forward. Not a word was exchanged, just that simple signal. "I don't care whose sister you are," Augustin continued. "This isn't a street corner. This is my property, and no one assaults my wife and stays." Isolde took a half step back. "You can't be serious." "I'm always serious," he said, "especially when it comes to who's allowed in my life, or my stores." She looked at me now, confused and cornered. "You married him? What is this? Some performance?" I finally met her eyes. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what she'd see in mine. "You didn't ask where I've been," I said quietly. "Maybe you should have." The air in the room thickened. Phones were recording now. A young woman near the bridal section whispered to her friend, "Is that really her husband?" Augustin remained calm. "This location, I own it, and as of now, your sister is no longer welcome." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Our mother stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage whatever control she thought she still had. "Augustin, with all due respect, this is a private matter. We don't air our family business." "This became public the second someone raised a hand in my store," he interrupted. "And trust me, nothing about what just happened will remain quiet. Your daughter saw to that." The security staff reached them now. One gestured toward the door. Isolde stood frozen, face pale, lips parted in disbelief. "I didn't mean," she began, but her voice didn't carry anymore. Not in that room. Not today. They were escorted out slowly, without resistance, but with eyes on them the entire way. And when the glass doors finally closed behind them, the silence broke all at once. Murmurs, questions, phones slipping into pockets. I didn't speak. Augustine turned to me and asked softly, "Are you okay?" I nodded once, though my jaw still ached and my hand clutched the necklace a little too tight. The manager approached, asking if I needed anything: water, a quiet space, an escort home. I declined. Instead, I walked to the counter and asked the associate, "Can you box this up, please?" She nodded, her eyes kind now, her demeanor shifted. As I waited, I caught my reflection in one of the display mirrors. Same face, same eyes. But something in me had altered. I didn't feel small anymore. Sometimes it wears a quiet smile and watches the world adjust. That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected. It wasn't something Augustine said. It wasn't even something I'd read. It was the feeling I carried all week after the jewelry store. I didn't rush to fill the silence that followed that moment. I let it breathe. I let it settle. 1 week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at the boutique with my name hand-lettered in navy ink. Inside was an invitation to the Santa Barbara Women's Empowerment Gala. Head table. I thought it was a mistake. I scanned the list again, flipping the card front to back. My name, but no mention of Isolde. When I brought it home and set it on the counter, Augustine glanced at it and said casually, "They reached out through my office. I'm a sponsor. They asked if my wife would be attending." There was no smirk, no weight in his voice, just fact, no performance. "And you said?" I said I'd let her decide. I took a slow breath, then nodded. The night of the gala, I wore a deep blue gown. Not flashy, not stiff, just right. Something I chose for myself without committee approval. My hair pulled back, my earrings simple, the kind of presence that didn't have to announce itself to be known. When I arrived at the venue, the event staff greeted me by name. One of them walked me to my table. The centerpiece was a glass sculpture shaped like a wave. The place card read Elodie Cade. I stood there a moment longer than I should have, fingertips grazing the edge of the chair. The room filled quickly. Executives, local politicians, nonprofit directors, women in pantsuits and women in pearls. I offered polite hellos, but didn't chase conversation. And then I saw her. Isolde walked through the front doors, flanked by 2 women I vaguely recognized from her workplace. She was radiant, polished as ever, her signature laugh already in use. She approached the check-in table confidently. The woman behind the iPad paused, then typed again. "Sorry, what was the last name?" "Varelli," Isolde said, brows lifting, as if the woman had insulted her. Another pause, fingers typing again. The woman's tone didn't change. "I don't have you on the list." Isolde laughed, that same laugh she used to dismiss everything. Mistakes, hurt feelings, facts she didn't like. "There must be a mix-up," she said. "I was asked to present. I've been on panels here for 3 years." "I understand," the woman said evenly. "But I don't have you listed for this year. Perhaps there was an oversight. Or—" She didn't finish the sentence. Isolde's smile flickered, just a fraction. But it was enough. Enough for me to recognize it. Confusion meeting consequence. She looked up, past the check-in, scanning the room. Her eyes landed on me. We locked eyes for just a breath. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I simply held her gaze, unflinching. Then she looked away, turned around, and exited as gracefully as she could. Before the cameras caught her. Later that night, After I returned home and kicked off my heels, I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The gala program lay beside me on the table. I didn't read it again. I'd lived it. I opened my phone and saw a missed call from a number I hadn't saved, but the voicemail transcribed itself on screen. It was my aunt, my mother's sister. The message was short, a little shaky. I thought you should know. Isolde said something at dinner the other night. Said, she always made Mom love her without trying. Maybe that's why she hits hard, because you never needed to raise your voice to be heard. I listened to it twice, then placed the phone down gently beside my glass. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my planner, turned to the next week, and wrote 3 words in the margin. Board application, Cade Foundation, not revenge, not rebellion, just forward. I didn't need noise. I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed space. And now I had it, and closes it. The drawer gave a soft click as it shut. The photo folded inside, resting where it belonged. No longer on display, no longer pretending. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence fill the space around me like water reaching stillness after a ripple. A few days had passed since the gala. Enough time for the noise to die down, for whispers to shift toward newer topics. But inside, things hadn't gone quiet. They'd rearranged themselves. That morning, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. The handwriting on the front was familiar, slanted, deliberate, and hesitant. My father's. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers brushing over the seal before opening it. Inside, 1 page, handwritten, no opening line, no date, just this. I knew. I watched. I chose silence. I regret that silence more than anything. You deserved better than my passivity. That was it. No justification, no attempt at revisionist history, just an acknowledgement. The kind that had never come when it would have mattered more, but came anyway, because maybe he realized that waiting for the perfect time was how people like him lost their daughters. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the drawer where I kept bills and medical documents, not as a keepsake, as a record. The next day, I met Isolde at a small cafe near the courthouse. No cameras, no audience. Just 2 sisters sitting across from each other at a corner table that smelled faintly of coffee grounds and vanilla. She showed up late, of course, sunglasses on, blazer buttoned, even though the afternoon sun was unforgiving. So, she said, sliding into the seat across from me, you really married him? I looked at her, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who no longer needed to explain herself. Not everything is about you, I replied. And not everything about me needs to be explained anymore. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. You act like I'm the villain in all this. You made your choices. I just stopped letting them cost me. She didn't respond, just stirred the iced coffee she hadn't touched. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope, placed it between us. What's this? Open it. She did. Inside was the necklace from the store, the one that had dropped when she slapped me. There was a note. You always said it looked better on you. I'm giving it back, but I'm not giving you me. She stared at it for a long time. Her mouth parted like she might argue, but no sound came out, and I didn't stay long enough to hear if she found one. I left without looking back. Back at home, I opened my laptop and finalized my application to join the Cade Foundation board. Not because I needed to prove anything, not because of Augustine, but because I had a voice now and a platform that didn't require permission. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks to the post office and mailed the envelope myself. No courier, no assistant, just me, waiting in line like everyone else, holding something that no longer weighed me down. When I returned, I pulled up the form for my legal records. Name, Elodie Mercier Cade. Not for show, not to spite anyone, because I chose it. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of mint tea. The sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows over the walls. I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out one last thing, a photo from childhood. My mother and sister beaming in the foreground, posed like queens. Me, in the corner, only half in the frame, almost invisible. I looked at it for a while, then folded it in half, not with anger, just finality. And I placed it in the same drawer where I had filed the letter from my father. But not everything stays closed forever. Some drawers creak open again, not from indecision, but because life finds ways to remind you that even closed chapters leave their scent behind. And that morning, a knock at the door wasn't a person, but a delivery, a box. No note, no return address, but I knew. I didn't open it. I set it beside my entryway table, beside the photo albums I hadn't touched in years and the umbrella stand I still hadn't emptied since last winter. I didn't need to read what might be inside. Some apologies come too late, and others don't come at all. Both can live in the same silence. That afternoon, I drove downtown. The notary's office was quiet, the receptionist soft-spoken. I had my papers ready, no hesitation. The man across the desk asked twice if I wanted to reconsider, as if giving up family claims was an act of desperation instead of liberation. I'm building a different legacy, I told him, signing with a steady hand. There was no ceremony to it, no one waiting outside to clap or question, just me, an ink pen, and a document that cut me loose from a weight I didn't owe anymore. On the drive home, my phone rang. Aunt Delia. I pulled into a shaded parking lot before answering. "Hey, honey," she said, voice familiar in that cracked walnut sort of way. "I didn't want to leave this in a message." I waited. You know, for a long time, I thought keeping quiet made things easier. For everyone, that if I stayed out of it, I wasn't part of the problem. A pause, a shaky breath. But watching you, these last few weeks, it made me realize silence is just permission in disguise. And you, Elodie, you didn't just break a pattern. You rebuilt something better. Tears welled, but didn't fall. That was the difference now. I could feel everything without it undoing me. "Thank you," I said. "No, sweet girl." "Thank you." Later that week, I stood in the Cade Foundation's conference room, facing a modest group of donors, advisors, and staff. Augustin was there, off to the side, arms crossed, watching but not steering. I took the microphone. "My name is Elodie Mercier Cade," I said, "and today I want to introduce our newest initiative, the Quiet Rise Fund." A slide clicked into place behind me. Simple. White background. 4 words in soft gray font. For the girls silenced. I spoke not to impress, but to reach. About women who had been tucked into corners, treated as support beams, denied their stories, and how this fund would help them write new ones. When I stepped down from the podium, no one stood. There was no dramatic applause, just quiet nods. Real ones. After the meeting, I walked through a community garden our foundation had helped reopen. Rows of herbs, tomatoes, marigolds. A few children ran along the mulch paths, giggling. A little girl in a faded sun hat approached me, holding a potted seedling. "Why are you here?" she asked. I knelt beside her, brushing dirt from my palm. "Because someone like me once needed someone like me now," I said. She nodded, solemn like only little kids can be, then offered me the seedling. I took it. That evening, after rinsing my hands and setting the small plant on my kitchen sill, I sat quietly on the couch. The unopened box from my mother was still there. I picked it up, turned it once in my hands, then placed it at the back of the closet, behind winter scarves and last year's tax folders. Not to forget, just to move it out of sight. Some things don't need to be opened to be understood, and some battles don't need a victor, just an end. They told me I was born to support someone else's spotlight. I looked out the window as twilight settled over the street. Turns out, I was just meant to build my own room with its own light. Sometimes the loudest strength is the one that never raises its voice. Elodie's story reminds us that being overlooked doesn't mean you're weak. It just means your moment hasn't arrived yet. And when it does, it won't need permission. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? What would you have done in her place? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more true, powerful stories like this waiting to be told, and maybe yours is next. Hi, I'm Sienna. 3 months ago, my sister pushed me into the ocean and said, "Learn to swim, loser." I didn't. I sank. I screamed. And my family, they just stood there, watched, didn't flinch, didn't move. I survived, barely. But when they came home that night, thinking they'd gotten away with it, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. What makes a family decide you're no longer worth saving? How long had they planned it? And what happens when the quiet one stops playing along? It took me longer than usual to get dressed. The navy blue dress I picked out wasn't new, just clean, simple, unassuming. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have, not trying to impress anyone, but just making sure I didn't look like I was trying too hard. Charleston's air was humid that evening, and I could feel it clinging to my skin as I stepped out of my car, heels clicking against the parking lot pavement. Inside the banquet hall, everything was expected. White linens, gold-trimmed place settings, a live jazz trio softly playing in the corner. It smelled like chicken marsala and perfumed hand lotion. I recognized the scent, Vera's. My mother never missed a chance to make an entrance. As I walked in, no one rushed over to greet me. A few heads turned, mostly polite nods, eyes flicking away quickly, as if they'd only looked to make sure I was real and then returned to their drinks. I spotted Callista in the center of the room, of course, surrounded, always surrounded. Her dress was sequined, deep emerald, bold, like her. She looked radiant in that artificial way people do when they know everyone is watching. I made my way toward the tables, careful not to let my purse knock over any centerpieces. The name cards were embossed, a glossy finish on ivory paper. I scanned each one slowly. There was a Callista, a Vera, a Marcus, and even Aunt Lorraine, but no Sienna. Finally, near the back, right next to the restrooms, I found it. Guest, table 9. My smile didn't falter. I'd learned that trick years ago. I took my seat beside Callista's stylist and one of Vera's bridge group friends, who smiled like she wasn't sure who I was but didn't want to ask. On the other side of me was a cousin I hadn't seen since the family reunion in 2013. I made small talk, the kind where no one really listens to the answers. I glanced up toward the head table. Callista was already giving her first toast of the night, her voice carrying over the speakers as if she'd been trained for it. People laughed at all the right moments, toasted to her beauty, her success, her everything. I lifted my glass when the others did. It felt automatic. In that moment, a memory from last year hit me like a flicked light switch. Me standing at a bakery 2 towns over, paying for the custom cake Callista had forgotten her card for. That same cake had 3 tiers, gold accents, and Callista's name written in cursive that looked like a magazine cover. That year, I wasn't invited to the head table either. I remembered another birthday, years ago. I was 27, still seated at the kids' table next to a 9-year-old who wiped their hands on my sleeve. When I asked Vera why, she'd said, "Sweetheart, you'll always be our baby." This wasn't new. It was just louder tonight. Callista's laughter echoed again. I caught Vera's gaze from across the room. She tilted her chin upward in acknowledgement, but it wasn't a smile. It was the kind of nod you give someone at the grocery store when you're not sure if you should say hi. I rose from my chair slowly and made my way to her after Callista's toast ended. "Hey," I said gently. "Was my seat a mistake?" Vera didn't blink. "Tonight isn't about you, sweetheart." That sentence hit with surgical precision. I nodded and walked away before I said something I'd regret, or worse, something I'd mean. Back at table 9, someone leaned in and asked, "Are you Callista's assistant?" I let out a soft laugh that probably sounded a lot like a cough. "No, I'm her sister." "Oh," she said, with a smile that said absolutely nothing. Callista passed our table about 20 minutes later. "Glad you made it," she said with a wink. "You didn't RSVP, right?" That wasn't a question. It was a dismissal dressed in friendliness. By the time dessert was being served, I'd had enough. I excused myself, claiming a headache. No one protested. No one offered to walk me out. Out in the parking lot, the air had cooled. I slid into the driver's seat and just sat there for a while. I turned the engine on, turned it back off, looked at my face in the rearview mirror. No mascara smudges, no tear trails, just me, unmoved. Invisibility wasn't loud. It didn't come with screaming or slamming doors. It was quiet. It was seat number 9, facing the restroom, with a name tag that didn't belong to me. Back at home, I kicked off my heels and opened my phone. There it was. One unread voicemail. Dad. 2 years old. I hadn't listened to it yet. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the play button. That night, I didn't know yet that this family wouldn't just erase me. Soon, they'd try to end me. I didn't open the email right away. I saw the subject line while brushing my teeth the next morning. Original will, dated before amended copy. And something in my chest went tight. I closed the laptop and paced the kitchen with my coffee. There are moments when you know the truth will change everything, and you hesitate. Not because you want to avoid it, but because once you know, there's no going back. Later that afternoon, I opened it, and I gasped. My name was there, in black and white, on a scanned PDF. Full legal language, notarized, dated a year before the family meeting. In the original will, Dad had split everything between Callista and me, equally. The Charleston condo was meant to be co-owned. The vacation fund, a joint trust for us both. And that little cabin up near Lake Hartwell? It was listed under my name alone. Now it was all gone. Just like that, 3 weeks had passed since that miserable birthday dinner, and the wounds hadn't scabbed over. They'd deepened. Callista called me that Thursday, her voice all cheer and syrup. "We're doing a little get-together Sunday," she said. "Mom wants to go over some things about Dad's estate. Just family. Come by if you can." As if nothing had happened. And I went. Because I needed to see it for myself. I needed to hear how they'd try to explain it away. Sunday afternoon, I drove out to Vera's house, a tidy 2-story tucked into an aging neighborhood where the hedges were always manicured, and the gossip traveled faster than the wind. Vera's porch still had the same flower pots from 10 years ago, but the paint on the shutters had faded. Callista's SUV was parked diagonally in the driveway, of course, like it owned the place. Inside, the air was thick with potpourri and lemon furniture polish. The smell always reminded me of control. Every candle, every framed photo in that house told you who mattered and who didn't. I walked into the living room where everyone was already seated. Callista lounged on the love seat like it was her throne. Marcus and Aunt Lorraine were chatting quietly on the side. Vera sat near the fireplace, her posture straight, hands folded neatly on her lap like she was attending a church board meeting. The lawyer was new, young, polished, and trying too hard to smile. His name was Mr. Denning. He stood beside the coffee table, a slim stack of papers in front of him. "We'll keep this brief," he began. I took the last open seat, notebook in hand, pen ready, like the naive version of me believed there'd be anything to write down. Mr. Denning began reading the will. Callista was named primary beneficiary of the condo. Vera would receive the remaining vacation accounts. The family art pieces would go to various cousins. Marcus somehow was getting a painting my dad hated. And me. Nothing. Not even a mention. Not even a symbolic item. like a pocket knife or an old photo album. I stared ahead, forcing my face to stay calm, even as my palms grew damp. When Mr. Denning finished, there was a silence that buzzed. I cleared my throat. Was this Dad's decision? I asked, eyes on Vera. She didn't blink. You've always been the independent one, Sienna. Your father knew that. He felt you'd do just fine without needing anything handed to you. The way she said it, like it was a compliment, like she was doing me a favor by cutting me out of his legacy. Callista added, not even trying to mask her condescension. It's what Daddy would have wanted. I nearly laughed, because I remembered our last phone call. Dad had called me out of the blue. He wasn't one for long chats, but he'd been sentimental that evening. I'd just gotten off a long shift and was too tired to really listen. He said, "Do you feel like I've protected you enough, kid?" I told him not to be silly. Of course he had. Now, hearing those words echo back made my throat tighten. After the meeting, I stepped out to the backyard. It was still green, still manicured, still as stiff as it had always been. Vera's idea of a garden was more for appearances than joy. I sat on the old wooden bench under the tree, the same one Dad used to read under when he needed quiet from the estrogen storm, as he'd put it. In my hand was a framed photo from the shelf inside, one of the family at the beach house 10 years ago. Everyone smiling, everyone accounted for. Except me, they had cropped me out, literally. There was a half-arm on the edge of the frame, mine. I felt the air drain from my lungs. They've rewritten the past, I whispered to no one. Now they're editing me out of the future. A few minutes later, Vera walked out with a plastic container in her hands. I packed you some of the pecan pie, she said. Cold. No smile, just the action. I shook my head. I'm good. She set it on the bench beside me anyway. Suit yourself, she said. Don't say I didn't offer. That moment hit harder than the will itself, because that's who she was. Casual cruelty disguised as kindness. I drove home, hands stiff on the wheel, the framed photo lying face down in the passenger seat. That night, I checked my email again. The attorney my father had used years ago had followed up. A second message. Subject line. Confirmation, your father's original will. I clicked, and this time I didn't hesitate. My heart pounded as I scrolled. There it was. My name. In bold. In ink. In truth. I leaned back in my chair, the light from the laptop screen flickering against my face as the message sent. My finger hovered just a second longer over the trackpad before I closed the computer and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for days. Outside, the sky had shifted from the soft pink of early evening to that heavy gray that signals a southern thunderstorm isn't far off. Rain would come, just like everything else lately, unannounced and inconvenient. I stood, stretched my back, and walked to the kitchen, refilling my glass with filtered water from the fridge. I wasn't hungry, not for food, not for answers I already knew would disappoint me. But I still needed something. I sat back down at the kitchen table, opened my phone, and scrolled through emails while sipping the water. At first, I was scanning for a reply from the attorney, but something else caught my eye. An email from the Charleston County Clerk's office. Subject line. Mortgage release confirmation, 7111 Ridgeway Drive. At first, I thought it was spam. I nearly deleted it. Then I froze. 7111 Ridgeway was the house my father had built for me when I was 24. He'd poured the foundation with his own hands. Said it was the one thing he could give me that no one could take away. I clicked. The body of the email confirmed the mortgage had been cleared, the property sold. 3 weeks ago. Finalized by 2 listed sellers, Vera Sinclair and Callista Monroe. My name was nowhere. The glass in my hand slipped. I caught it just before it hit the floor. My heart was pounding so loudly it muffled the world. I whispered to no one. That's not possible. I grabbed my keys, threw on the first hoodie I could find, and was in my car in under 5 minutes. Charleston's downtown traffic had already picked up from the late dinner crowd. It gave me too much time to think as I drove to the records office. I rehearsed what I'd say. How I'd explain this was a mistake. That there must have been some clerical error. The clerk behind the counter was polite, maybe a little too used to these kinds of requests. I gave her the address. She typed it in with practiced keystrokes, then nodded and printed out a few documents. "Here you go," she said. Transfer was filed last month, signed by both Vera Sinclair and Callista Monroe, all standard. "I never signed anything," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "That house was in my name, sole title." She blinked, sympathetic. "There's a signature here." She slid the paper toward me. It was my name, but it wasn't. It was close enough to fool someone unfamiliar, but not close enough to fool me. I leaned in, examining the curve of the S, the inconsistent pressure in the last A. My signature had always been tight, confident. This one wobbled, like someone had copied it off a driver's license and held their breath while forging. My hands balled into fists at my sides. "Who filed the paperwork?" I asked. "Initial filing came from an estate law firm, Monroe Clark," she replied. "Of course, Callista's husband's firm." I didn't say another word. I took the documents, walked out, and sat in my car for a long time with the engine running. The papers rested on my lap like a loaded weapon. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to squeeze out of me, just heat, pure, low-burning heat. 10 minutes later, I pulled into Vera's driveway. The porch light was on, like always. I didn't knock. I walked around the side yard, knowing full well I'd find her out back in the garden. There she was, snipping rose stems with her gloves on, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that made her look like something out of a Southern Living magazine. "Did you forge my name?" She didn't flinch. Didn't even turn. "It's just a house, Sienna." I stepped closer. "You had no right. You haven't lived there in years. It was sitting empty, falling apart. We put the money to better use." "We?" Callista stepped out from the back patio door like she'd been waiting. She folded her arms, leaning against the frame like it was her stage. "Hi, little sis," she said, sweet as a splinter. "Still playing the victim, I see." I turned back to Vera. "This is fraud. I could take this to court." She took off her gloves, laid them carefully on the patio table, and finally met my eyes. "You could," she said. "But is it worth it? Dragging the family through all that for some empty property?" I didn't answer, because I knew they were counting on my silence, on my exhaustion, on me choosing peace over justice. I walked inside, through the kitchen I'd grown up in. It felt hollow now. The counter was cleaner than I remembered. The fridge had none of the magnets that used to clutter it with childhood art and takeout menus. I checked the cabinet near the back door. Empty. Dad's old toolbox was gone. The drawer beneath it, where he used to keep stamps and envelopes, was filled with neatly folded linen napkins now. New ones. Not a trace of him left. They hadn't just taken the house. They'd been erasing me, inch by inch. In my mind, I saw a younger version of myself sitting on the porch with Dad, hammering nails into a crooked mailbox post. I was 24, fresh out of a job and a bad breakup, and he'd said, "If this family ever turns on you, this is your shelter." And now it was gone. I drove back to my apartment in silence. No radio. Just the rhythmic click of the turn signal and the sound of rubber against pavement. When I got home, I tossed the forged documents on the kitchen counter, opened the voice memo app on my phone, and began speaking. "If they want to treat me like I don't exist," I said, my voice steady, "let's see what happens when I stop pretending I owe them anything." I ended the recording, saved it under a new folder labeled War Chest. Then I pulled up my email, opened a blank message. To attorney@finnandgrace.com. Subject: "We need to talk about fraud." And I sent it. For the first time in a long while, I felt something other than numbness. It wasn't peace. It wasn't fear. It was purpose. They were going to regret not making sure. That thought rang in my head, sharp and quiet, as the ambulance doors slammed shut behind me. I drifted in and out of consciousness, the smell of iodine and ocean salt lingering in my nose, mixing with the harsh sting of oxygen being forced into my lungs. There were voices, someone counting, someone swearing under their breath, a beep, beep, beep that reminded me I was still here. Barely. It was 2 days before I fully opened my eyes again, and even then, I couldn't move without the dull ache in my chest reminding me that water had filled places where air was supposed to be. The nurse, her name was Patricia, told me I'd washed up nearly a mile from the dock. "A jogger found you," she said, gently adjusting the blanket. "You weren't breathing when the EMTs got there." I blinked slowly. They didn't think you'd make it, but I had. And now, lying there with a tangle of tubes and a monitor clicking beside me, the fog in my mind began to clear, moment by moment, memory by memory. Callista. The dock. Her voice. "Learn to swim, loser." The way she laughed. The way they all watched. They hadn't saved me. They hadn't panicked. They'd walked away. Patricia gave me a phone later that evening. I asked for it, not to call anyone. I knew no one was coming, but to check the date. I needed to know how long it had been. 48 hours since they'd tried to erase me. I tapped open my email, then my notes app. I started typing. Names, dates, deeds, everything I could remember from the past few months. And that's when I saw the calendar reminder. Family Beach Weekend. Folly House. The plan had been in motion long before dinner was served. They lured me there. It had been Callista's idea. "We need to keep traditions alive," she'd said with that fake little laugh. "Even after everything, we're still family." Family. A word I no longer trusted. I'd arrived late on purpose that day, parking down the street to avoid the usual parade of forced smiles. The rental house was identical to the ones before. Beach-themed decor, seashell art, pale blue walls, the scent of sunscreen and old air freshener. Inside, the energy had been off from the start. Too cheerful, too calculated. Callista had hugged everyone, Aunt Lorraine, Marcus, even Vera, but skipped over me entirely. Not even a nod. Just turned her body sideways like I wasn't there. Vera introduced me to one of the neighbors who stopped by to say hello. "This is our youngest," she said, her hand hovering behind me but never touching. "She's between jobs right now." Between jobs. I was working full-time at a non-profit legal clinic, but of course Vera didn't think that counted. Not in the same way Callista's brand did. Not when it couldn't be shown off on social media. At dinner, the insults were subtle, but sharp. The long table had custom name cards. Everyone had theirs, except me. I sat down quietly at the far end with Marcus, who didn't even glance up from his phone. And then Callista raised her glass. "To family," she beamed. "And to dreams that grow up with us. Remember when Sienna wanted to be a lawyer? So cute." Laughter. Some polite, some genuine. No one defended me. No one looked my way. I chewed my food slowly, swallowed the shame. I had planned to leave that night. But then Callista announced, "Let's get some sunset photos down on the dock. Sienna, you coming?" The way she said it, casual, like a challenge dressed in friendliness, I hesitated. Something in my gut twisted. I looked toward Vera, who suddenly had a headache and said she'd stay back. Marcus stood, tossing his napkin down. "Let's go. The light won't last forever." I followed, slow steps down the wooden path toward the dock. The air smelled like salt and secrets. The water glistened in the fading sunlight. Callista walked ahead, her heels clicking sharply on the planks. I trailed behind. Marcus lingered just close enough behind me to block retreat. Once we reached the edge, Callista turned. She smiled. Not warm, not cruel either, just hollow. "You forgot where you came from, didn't you?" she said, arms crossed. "Or maybe," I replied, "I just outgrew who I was told to be." Marcus snorted. Callista stepped closer. "You think you're better than us now? With your little non-profit job and your moral high ground?" I didn't respond. "You used to be quiet," she went on. "Used to know your place." And then, she shoved me, hard. The world tilted sideways. My feet lost the dock. My lungs clamped shut. The sound of water swallowed everything. Cold, crashing, panic. I kicked wildly, but my shoes were heavy. I clawed upward, surfaced once, gasped. They were still standing there, watching. Then everything went black. Later, I would find out I'd floated for over a mile before a jogger spotted my body on the rocks. They'd called 911. Said I looked like driftwood at first. Pale, still, lifeless. The paramedics worked on me for 12 minutes before they found a pulse. When I opened my eyes 2 days later in that hospital room, I knew only one thing for certain. This wasn't over. They thought they'd left me behind. They thought I was too small, too scared, too silent. But I'd survived, and they were going to regret not making sure. The beeping was soft at first, like a distant ticking clock counting something down. I wasn't sure what I was waking into. My body didn't hurt exactly. It was more like it was made of stone, too heavy to lift, too cold to feel. Light pierced through my eyelids. The smell was sterile. Machines whirred around me, and there was a dull ache deep in my chest, as though something had tried to hollow me out and failed halfway through. When I finally opened my eyes, a face hovered over me, round cheeks, kind eyes, soft voice. "Welcome back, sweetheart," the nurse whispered. Her name tag read Patricia. "We didn't think you'd make it." She said it with warmth, but also with that cautious tone nurses use when they're bracing someone for the truth. "You've been here for 2 days. I see you. They pulled you from the rocks near James Island. A jogger found you. Unresponsive. No ID on you. EMTs worked for almost 15 minutes. I tried to speak, but the breathing mask over my face hissed at my attempt. She patted my arm gently. "Don't try to talk yet. Rest." But I couldn't rest. Not really. My brain had woken up, even if my body hadn't caught up yet. Callista's voice rang in my skull. "Learn to swim, loser." Her laugh, the way Marcus looked down at me, and Vera, her absence, her silence. I drifted back out of consciousness for a while, then in again. Patricia brought water through a straw when the tubes were gone, a soft blanket, and eventually, a phone. "I figured you might want this," she said. "We called your emergency contacts." No one answered. I blinked at her. My voice cracked. "No one?" She shook her head. "Voicemail full. Eventually, the admin team listed you as no family available. I'm sorry." Those 4 words, "no family available," burned more than the salt water that had torn through my lungs. It was one thing to know, deep down, that you'd been cut out of the group. It was another to have it documented, to see it written down in cold administrative language like you were already dead to them. Patricia hesitated before speaking again. "Do you want us to try calling someone again?" "No," I rasped. They made their choice. The next morning, after I managed to shower on shaky legs and sit up for longer than 5 minutes, Patricia brought in some clothes from a donation bin. Sweatpants, a loose shirt. "Do you have a ride?" she asked. "No one's coming." She didn't argue. She just left the clothes and gave me a long, sad look, the kind reserved for people who had survived something ugly and come back changed. After she left, I opened the hospital-issued notepad they'd placed on the tray beside me. I started writing. Property records, Ridgeway, will drafts, original amended, clerk email confirmation, Callista's social accounts, TikTok video. If it exists, grab link. Voice note. Dad left. Recheck tone. Intent. It wasn't neat. It wasn't even coherent in places, but it was a list. And a list meant I was still thinking like me. They left me in the water. I'd leave them in the open. 2 hours later, Patricia walked in with my discharge paperwork. "You sure about this?" she asked gently. "You could stay another day, get stronger." "I'll recover better at home," I told her. I didn't mean physically. She didn't press. I signed the forms. She helped me walk to the curb. She offered to call a cab. I pulled up a rideshare app instead and thanked her with what little voice I had left. When I got back to my apartment, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was roaring. I dropped my bag at the door, kicked off the hospital slides, and sank to the floor, still in the baggy sweats they gave me. After a long minute, I pulled myself up and went to the hall closet. On the top shelf was a cardboard box labeled in my handwriting, "Family, do not touch." I dragged it out, dumped it on the kitchen table. Inside were receipts from Ridgeway House repairs, screenshots of texts between me and Callista from the past few years, copies of the original will my father signed, Even a church newsletter where Vera had written about raising two strong daughters while only including a photo of Callista. I opened a new manila folder, labeled it Phase 1. My silence had been weaponized against me for decades. They assumed I'd play the role forever, the quiet one, the helper, the forgiver, the one who smiled politely when dismissed, who nodded along to insults packaged as jokes. They wanted me invisible. But invisibility is not the same as powerlessness. And now, my silence was strategic. I picked up the hospital notepad again and drew 3 vertical lines across the page. Legal, financial, public. The 3 fronts of this quiet war. Then, I reached for the phone Patricia had given back. I tapped through the voicemails. Most were spam. One from my building's office. One from the pharmacy. And then, Dad's message. Still unread. Still waiting. I tapped play. His voice filled the room. Raspy. Careful. Hey, Sienna. Just thinking about you today. Nothing urgent. Just, I wanted to make sure you knew something. If it ever gets too quiet, if you ever feel like no one's got your back, remember, I did. I always did. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I wasn't broken. I was focused. 2 weeks had passed since I signed myself out of the hospital, and I still hadn't told a soul what had really happened. Not the nurse who called to check in, not the building manager who asked about the bruises up and down my arms, not even the woman at the pharmacy who gave me a free sample of lotion because she could see in my eyes I was hurting. And yet, somehow, everyone would know soon. It was a Saturday morning when I got the message. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring blankly at a stack of papers that still smelled faintly like hospital disinfectant and frustration. My phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen in years popped up. Melissa Campbell, college friend. We hadn't spoken since graduation. Her message was short. This is you, right? There was a link beneath it. I clicked. It was a TikTok. Caption, sibling prank gone wrong. Maj salt life, hashash loser. The video opened with the sound of laughter, surf crashing in the background. The camera was shaky, like someone filming from their hip. And there I was, standing on the dock, surrounded. Callista's voice was clear as day. Learn to swim, loser. Then, she shoved me. The camera caught me hitting the water, flailing. You couldn't see what happened after, but that didn't matter. The comments were already pouring in. OMG, this family is savage! Did she really not know how to swim? Iconic big sister energy. She's fine. Drama queen, LOL. That one had a blue check next to it. Callista, responding directly. My hands trembled as I scrolled. There were over 400,000 views, more than 3,000 comments, laughing emojis, memes. Someone had even stitched the video with a soundbite of cartoon drowning noises. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore, it was public. It was viral. I closed the app, sat in stunned silence for a moment, then opened my laptop. Legal hotline. Charleston. Personal injury and defamation. I clicked the first firm with decent reviews and dialed. A woman named Denise answered, listened as I explained. Briefly, calmly, though my voice cracked once, she asked if I had documentation. I have video, I said. Screenshots, a medical report, and a witness who saw me pulled from the water. She asked me to email everything, and just like that, the switch flipped. And they wanted attention. They got it. Now I wanted justice. I started compiling. Data video upload, 14 days after the incident. Caption, sibling prank gone wrong. Comment from Callista, she's fine. Drama queen LOL. Location tagged, Folly Beach. I took screenshots of the video, saved a copy offline, then began filling out DMCA takedown requests through TikTok's platform. From there, I emailed a lawyer specializing in digital defamation and assault. Her name was Ria, and within an hour she responded requesting a Zoom meeting. I was building a case. Quietly. Thoroughly. Every document, every photo from the hospital, every bit of digital proof. I dropped into folders labeled like weapons. Evidence. Physical. Evidence. Social. Evidence. Legal. That same day, Callista posted a follow-up video. She was sitting in her car, sunglasses on, sipping from a straw. "Look," she said with a laugh, "some people can't take a joke. Not everyone's built for social media. My family has always teased each other. That's just how we roll." She even winked. I clipped the video, filed it. Every word she said was another nail in her own narrative. Later that evening, I noticed a shift online. A small local blog picked up the story. Is this Charleston's real-life family feud? The article was short, filled with speculation, but it included the video and my name. And for the first time, the comment section wasn't cheering. This wasn't a prank. Why is no one talking about the fact she nearly died? What kind of mother doesn't check on her daughter after that? Then, another message. Narina, Callista's daughter. "I saw the video," she wrote. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I didn't reply, but I screenshotted the message anyway. By Sunday, my inbox held a new notification from the Charleston District Court. My petition had been accepted. Date set, 30 days from now. It would be a civil hearing, intentional infliction of emotional distress, digital defamation, assault. Ria said we could push for a financial settlement or take it to trial. "I don't want money," I told her. "I want it on record. I want the world to see what they did." "They're gonna fight it," she warned me. "They'll push hard." I hope they do. They played with my pain for likes. Now they'd be streaming my victory in real time. The video played on a loop in my head, even as the file uploaded to the encrypted drive. I'd saved 3 backups: cloud, hard copy, and a flash drive tucked inside the lining of my purse. I wasn't just preparing for court. I was preparing for war. That night, as I was shutting down my laptop, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Narina. This time, it wasn't an apology, it was a voice note. I hesitated, thumb hovering over play. The weight of what she might say pressed against my ribs like an anchor. Then I tapped. "Aunt Sienna, I don't know who else to tell. I think Mom lied. There's a second video, one she didn't post. She told me not to look through her drafts, but I did. You need to see it. Please, can we meet?" I stared at the screen, stunned, not by the fact that Callista had hidden more, but by the fact that her own daughter had seen it and was brave enough to reach out. We agreed to meet the next morning at a little strip mall cafe on the edge of Charleston. I picked a place where no one in our family would go, a quiet spot tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. When I walked in, Narina was already there, sitting in the corner, hoodie pulled over her head, sipping a Sprite like she'd aged 5 years since the last time I saw her. She slid a flash drive across the table without saying a word. "Where did you find it?" I asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Her phone. She left it unlocked. I transferred it to my school USB and deleted it off hers." "She doesn't know." I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Are you okay?" Narina gave a humorless smile. "Not really, but I want you to win." I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm proud of you." When I got home, I didn't wait. I inserted the drive into my laptop and opened the file labeled Doc, Alt Angle. The footage was clearer than the TikTok version. No music, no emojis, just the raw video. Callista standing to my left, Marcus behind me, their bodies angling, her voice chilling. "Learn to swim, loser." And then the push. No hesitation, no stumble, no laughter afterward, just silence. It wasn't a prank, it was calculated. I pressed pause, closed the lid, and walked to the bathroom. The stall felt familiar, even though I hadn't been in one like this in months. I sat on the toilet lid, the cold tile grounding me. For a moment, the pressure behind my eyes broke. I let the tears come. Not for weakness, not for pity, but for release. When it passed, I stood, washed my face, stared into the mirror. "This is no longer my trauma," I said aloud, voice steady. "It's my weapon." The next morning, I remembered the small key Dad had given me years ago. "Just in case." he'd said with that same look he always had when he was giving me something bigger than it looked. If anything ever happens, go. I dug through the old jewelry box in the back of my closet, pulled out the key with the faded label. Storage, Unit 214B. It took me 20 minutes to find the facility, 30 more to remember which corner it was tucked into. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. I signed in, walked down the cement hallway, and opened the unit. Inside were boxes, plastic tubs, a folded cot, and in the far back, a small fireproof safe. The key fit like it had been waiting. Inside, on top, was a manila envelope labeled Sienna, only if they hurt you. I sat down on the cot and opened it. The letter inside was thick with ink and memory. My sweet girl, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And something happened I was afraid might. Your mother. She changed. I saw it years ago. And Callista, well, she always wanted to be queen of something. I hoped it would never come to this, but just in case, I left copies of the original will in this unit. I named Mr. Denning as the true executor. Don't let anyone tell you different. I made arrangements with him directly. If they ever try to erase you, you fight back. I raised a woman, not a doormat. You are not invisible to me, baby girl. Never were. Love, Dad. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, just holding the letter, breathing in the scent of old paper and gasoline from the cot's canvas. And then I stood. By that afternoon, I was at Vera's door. She opened it with the usual air of control, arms folded, face unreadable. "What now?" she said, not even moving aside. I handed her the letter. Said nothing. She scanned it. Eyes darted left to right, her mouth parted slightly. She looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't seen from her since childhood. Uncertainty. "You tried to erase me," I said calmly. "He made sure you couldn't." I turned and left before she could respond. That evening, I sat in Ria's office, folder in hand. I laid everything out. Flash drive from Rowan, the video from Narina, the original will, Elior's letter, screenshots of Callista's TikToks. Ria looked at me over her glasses. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded. "Let's go to court." That night, while heating up leftover pasta, I saw a new notification from TikTok. Callista had posted again. This time, no jokes, no music. Just her face, pale under the kitchen lights. "Sometimes," she said, "blood betrays you harder than strangers. Let's see who survives the storm." I clicked, save evidence, then leaned back in my chair and whispered, "Challenge accepted." The morning of the hearing arrived with an unsettling stillness. No birdsong, no wind brushing through the trees outside my apartment, just quiet. A kind of hush that came before storms or verdicts. I dressed slowly, nothing flashy, just a deep navy dress with clean lines, a blazer I hadn't worn in years, and flat black shoes. Practical. Grounded. The kind of outfit that said I wasn't there for drama, I was there for facts. At 8:03 a.m., I walked through the glass doors of the Charleston County Courthouse. The air inside was sterile, tinged with that faint metallic scent that always made me think of waiting rooms and metal file drawers. My heels echoed across the tile floor, steady and sharp. Callista had arrived already. I could see her through the glass doors of the courtroom, sitting next to her attorney, a woman in a sharp red suit with a media smile and a rehearsed confidence. Two makeup artists flitted nearby, dabbing at her cheekbones, smoothing flyaways. There were cameras in the hallway. Of course there were. Vera sat alone near the back of the gallery, sunglasses on indoors. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest, like she was bracing against more than the air conditioning. I didn't speak to her. I didn't need to, because this time, I wasn't the one on trial. We were called to order at 8:30 sharp. The judge, a wiry man in his 60s with a voice like a blade, took his seat and reviewed the case details out loud. "This is a civil suit filed by Miss Sienna Sinclair against Miss Callista Monroe. The charges are as follows: defamation, intentional emotional distress, and reckless endangerment. Miss Monroe has filed a counterclaim alleging defamation in return. The court will now hear opening statements." Callista's attorney stood first. She was good, polished, measured. She smiled when she said my name. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a family misunderstanding blown wildly out of proportion. A beach day, a sibling prank, and a viral video taken out of context. Miss Monroe did not act with malice. She believed her sister knew how to swim, as many witnesses will attest. Was it a lapse in judgment? Certainly. But a crime? No. I stood slowly when it was my turn. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. I would like to represent myself. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised an eyebrow. You understand the risk of self-representation? I do. Proceed. I walked forward, stopping exactly where I needed to be, not one step too close to Callista, not one step back. I'm not here to perform, I said. I'm not here to make you like me. I'm here because I nearly died. I'm here because the people who were supposed to love me stood on a dock and watched me drown, and then one of them posted it online, for views. I turned, nodded to the clerk. She loaded the first video, Rowan's file. The courtroom darkened as the screen flickered to life. There it was. Callista, her voice clear, her body language undeniable. Learn to swim, loser. Push, splash, silence. I heard someone in the back gasp. I followed it with screenshots from her TikTok comments. She's fine, drama queen, LOL. And then the original will. The one my father had signed before it was quietly replaced. And then, finally, the letter. I was not a sister, I said. I was content, a thing to be managed, a resource to be erased when inconvenient. I've spent 32 years surviving this family. Today, I stop. The courtroom was dead silent when I stepped back. Then came Callista's turn to speak. Her lawyer tried to hold her back, but it didn't last. Callista stood, red in the face. She's always been like this, she snapped. Jealous, bitter. She didn't deserve any of it. She just couldn't stand that I made something of myself. The attorney hissed, "Sit down!" But Callista kept going. She made everything harder. Mom said we had to include her. You don't know what it's like to carry someone your whole life. I said nothing, because she was doing exactly what I needed her to do. Across the room, Narina sat next to a social worker, her expression unreadable. But I saw it. The moment something inside her shifted, the judge banged his gavel. Enough, he said. This court will recess. I'll return with a decision after review. 2 hours later, we reconvened. The judge didn't waste time. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Sinclair. The court rules that Miss Monroe's actions constituted reckless endangerment and digital defamation. Civil penalties will be imposed. Callista inhaled sharply. In addition, the judge continued, given the concern for Miss Monroe's judgment and influence, temporary custody of minor child Narina Monroe is hereby transferred to the Department of Social Services pending further review. Vera stood and walked out before the rest of the ruling could be read. Callista broke down crying, not to me, not for Narina, for the camera in the back row. As the bailiff approached to escort her outside, Narina rose slowly. She walked past her mother, straight to me. Can I come with you? She asked, voice small. I opened my arms. She folded into them. I didn't cry. Not there. Not yet. Later, in a small room off the side of the courtroom, I filled out a form. Restraining order request. Callista's name printed neatly in black ink. When asked for the reason, I wrote, because I'm done playing family with strangers who tried to drown me. Outside, the swarm of press descended like crows. I walked through them without a word. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted. One reporter stepped forward, recording. Miss Sinclair, what now? I paused just long enough, then I turned slightly, met her gaze. Now? I said. I rebuild. I rebuild. That was the last thing I said to the press, and I meant every syllable. 3 months later, I stood in front of the house my father built with his own hands. Fresh paint, new trim. The porch steps no longer groaned beneath your weight, and the front door, once weathered and warped, now opened with the ease of a promise fulfilled. The yard was no longer overrun with weeds. The flower beds had been cleared and replanted with lavender and low-maintenance rosemary. Dad had always wanted things that bloomed without needing too much attention. I figured it was time I honored that. This house had once been stolen from me, signed away with forged ink and casual cruelty. Now, it was mine again, not through inheritance, through fight. I stepped inside. The walls still echoed with old memories, but I'd painted over the ones I didn't want. The kitchen no longer smelled like my mother's perfume. The hallway no longer carried the sound of Callista's heels. I walked slowly, touching the door frames as I passed, like greeting old friends. In the front hallway hung a single photo. Dad and me. Fishing rods in hand. Smiling like the world hadn't touched us yet. I had it reframed. It now sat beneath a small plaque I had engraved. Some roots grow deeper after the storm. That felt like truth, and I'd had enough of lies. 2 rooms in the back had been converted, one into an office, the other into a tiny consultation space. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I opened the house for free legal aid appointments, women needing help with protective orders, property disputes, digital harassment cases. Most came quietly. Some cried, but all of them left with something they didn't have when they arrived. A sense they weren't alone. On the front porch hung a small, weathered sign. I made it myself. Not perfect, but the message was clear. You are not invisible. The mail came at noon, as it always did. That day, a single envelope stood out. No return address. Handwritten. I knew the penmanship. Vera. I took the letter inside, sat at the kitchen table with a glass of iced tea, and opened it. It was short. 1 sentence. I hope you find what you're looking for. No apology, no explanation, just distance dressed up as civility. I folded it once and tucked it into the drawer beneath the sink. Not to forget, but not to carry. That same evening, just as the sun began casting long gold shadows across the backyard, I heard footsteps on the porch. It was Narina. She stood there with a small duffel bag and tired eyes. I got placed with Aunt Monica, she said quietly. She's nice, but I don't feel like I fit there. I stepped aside. She walked in. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. That night, she stayed in the guest room, the one with the pale blue walls and a window that looked out over the marsh. I left a fresh towel on the bed, a new toothbrush in the drawer. When I checked on her an hour later, she was already asleep, backpack on the floor, math book open on her chest. She didn't need to say it. I knew. You didn't just save yourself, she whispered earlier on the porch. You saved me too. In the weeks that followed, we fell into a rhythm. I helped her with homework. She watered the garden. We didn't talk about Callista. We didn't need to. Some things deserve silence. Not because we're afraid of the words, but because we've finally stopped giving them oxygen. One night, after dinner, we sat on the porch together. The marshlands behind the house shimmered under the setting sun. The air smelled like salt and basil. I sipped my tea. Narina scribbled something in a notebook, brow furrowed in concentration. They taught me what silence costs, I said softly, not expecting a response. I chose to speak. They drowned me in the ocean. I looked out across the still water. I built a bridge out of it. She didn't look up, but she smiled. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the sea into the porch screens. The sky deepened into a bruised violet, streaked with orange. Narina stood, walked inside, and returned with 2 mugs, one for each of us. She handed me mine without a word. I held it, warm between my palms, and looked at her. What? She asked with a grin. I smiled back. Nothing. Just, this feels like something Dad would have liked. She nodded. He'd be proud of you. We sat in silence as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Some wounds don't close. But some women learn to live as if they were never meant to break. Some people think silence means weakness, but sometimes it's just strategy. Sienna's story reminds us, the ones who endure the longest often carry the sharpest truths. When loyalty is abused and love turns into leverage, choosing yourself is no longer selfish, it's survival. What would you do if your own family tried to erase you? If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, maybe even healing, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more stories that hit just as deep.